Hello and welcome to This Week in Bitcoin, brought to you by Relai Private. And this week, as you can see, in a bit of a different setting, there's a simple reason to it. I'm at Bitcoin Amsterdam and we have loads of fun there. There will be a video out about this as well. But nevertheless, we got something to talk about this week because boy oh boy, did we have some exciting news. News number one come out of the Middle East, and that is that the National Bank of Bahrain is announcing interest and they're already implementing plans for a Bitcoin investment product. This can now look a few different ways. Either they buy shares into the ETFs, they create bonds, sort of like the volcano bonds we announced and heard out of El Salvador, or they buy Bitcoin on the spot, put it on the balance sheet and use it as a treasury reserve asset. This is the most likely thing to happen because if you look at actually the investment philosophy, let's call it, in the Middle East, it very rarely is that they want to speculate. They're more keen on having a conservative approach, something that works over time, store of value, increase, and less of, let's call it the West approach, where, sometimes national banks turn into hedge funds. Looking at you, Swiss National Bank. But this time around, I think it will be the later. It definitely, in my opinion, is going to be a treasury reserve asset strategy call. And considering how, quick the Middle East is to move, we've seen it a bit with the investment into Bitcoin mining and the expansion in Bitcoin mining in the Middle East. It basically went from a very little thing to a huge scale. And if we now apply the same logic to, hey, Bitcoin is the best reserve asset, why don't we have so many? You could be looking at something like this, and Bahrain suddenly has huge amounts of Bitcoin on their balance sheet. Whether it be a 30% to GDP allocation like Bhutan remains to be seen, but very bullish in my opinion. And the Middle East is here, and Bitcoin is going places. Then the second news, real quickly, we have to talk about the HBO documentary because it was hyped to be Len Sassaman, that turned out to be Satoshi. For a few hours before the documentary, people speculated again on, it's at the back. And then the documentary came out, and it was, no offense, Peter Todd, who they announced as Satoshi, or the journalist who did the documentary announced as Satoshi. And Peter's a great guy. He's a very much a developer early on in Bitcoin, sort of a coding talent, got in very young. But yeah, also throughout the whole documentary with the clips you've seen, maybe Peter sort of had to laugh, and even at one point went like, Bitcoiners will laugh at you if they see this clip because I am not Satoshi. And the arguments for him being Satoshi were also so dumb, like, oh, you replied to one of his posts on the Bitcoin Talk forum. Yeah, we all probably did if you were on there in the early days. So idiotic. But yeah, proving again the point I made in my other video that, at the end of the day, they're not really interested in who Satoshi is. It's more that phenomenon like, oh, we found it out and stuff. So yeah, a lot of entertainment. We now know, same as we did before, that is that we don't care who Satoshi is. But nevertheless, we've got some good clips from that documentary. We have to admit that. And then lastly, we also have some news out of FTX, where for a long time there were some rumors if customers are going to get repaid. This week, we hear that 98% of the customers' funds are going to get repaid. And that is a shocking $16.5 billion, capital B, dollars that are now getting distributed back. The only thing is there's a catch-22. You're not going to get it in crypto or in, let's say, if you had Bitcoin on FTX, you're going to get it in the fiat denominator at the point of which the exchange went down. So let's say you had a Bitcoin on the exchange, it was worth, let's say, 20 grand. I'm making a very simple explanation here. And they went bust. You're not getting now a Bitcoin sent to a Bitcoin address of you, but rather $20,000 because that's the price that it was back then. So very frustrating. Nevertheless, 16.5 billion is a huge sum of money. And it's very likely, in my opinion, that portions of these investors will invest back into digital assets. Hopefully, they've learned their lesson to not burn their fingers with shitcoins and go into Bitcoin. Sorry for the vulgar language, but they are at the end of the day. and others will probably just take the money and never get into the ecosystem again. But yeah, we will need to see and wait to get to know what happens. But at the end of the day, also very good, obviously for the FTX customers. And on the other end, now there is liquidity again that could be distributed. And all they need to do is to realize now that it's Bitcoin only, because we all know there is no second best. And that's it with This Week in Bitcoin. If you got questions, feedback, or just want to say hello, leave a comment below. But I look forward to seeing you next week again, and I hope the news were informative and entertaining enough.